It is now confirmed. Jacob Zuma, formerly considered one of South Africa's most powerful and compelling governmental personalities, now is indebted to the government nearly 29 million rand. But this is not currency associated with contracts, governmental contributions, or infrastructure initiatives. This is currency that was diverted from the civilian treasury to finance Zuma's individual legal confrontations waged to shield himself against accusations of deception, graft, and extortion that extended back over 2 decades, all the way to the infamous 1999 weapons transaction. The Gauteng High Court, in a verdict delivered with unmistakable authority, has made it evident Zuma must reimburse every cent of the R28.9 million along with accumulated interest. This is not merely a judicial verdict. It is an exceptional instance of responsibility in a territory long tainted by governmental favoritism and the exploitation of civilian assets. The contradiction of the circumstances is pronounced. Jacob Zuma, an individual who once portrayed himself as a defender of everyday South Africans, now confronts the tribunals to respond for currency he expended on protecting himself from accountability. Currency that originated directly from the contributors he professed to serve. 4 years everyday residents endured joblessness, inconsistent power supply, deteriorating facilities, and escalating survival expenses. Meanwhile, Zuma conducted legal operations at the territory's cost, submitting challenges, postponing hearings, and depleting every procedural option accessible to him. Every impediment, every adjournment, every endeavor to postpone responsibility was financed by the precise individuals he professed to champion. This week, the situation reached a striking culmination. Judge Anthony Miller of the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria issued a verdict that left no space for uncertainty. Zuma is obligated to reimburse R28.9 million to the state attorney, with interest accumulating on the amount from the dates the sums were initially requested. The tribunal's determination brings resolution to an extended contentious conflict between the previous president, the presidential office, and resistance organizations such as the Democratic Alliance, DA, and the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, who have persistently advocated for the retrieval of civilian resources exploited to finance Zuma's protection. The verdict emphasizes a straightforward concept: civilian currency is not an individual reserve fund, and even the most influential politicians are responsible for the exploitation of it. To comprehend the complete significance of this determination, one must revisit the chronicle leading to it. Years previously, the administration formally notified Zuma that he needed to compensate the expense of his legal protection. These were expenses the government was never intended to assume. Instead of adherence, Zuma provided quietness, no compensation, no recognition, no participation. His unwillingness left the presidential office and the state attorney with no alternative but to return to the tribunals, not to contest principle but merely to retrieve the resources. His judicial contentions that accusations against him were associated with his administrative responsibilities and that the government was therefore compelled to cover his charges had already been rejected conclusively in 2021 by the Supreme Court of Appeal. That determination firmly declared that Zuma had no entitlement to government-financed legal representation for individual graft investigations. This week's verdict, therefore, is more than merely another judicial disappointment. It is the formal rejection of Zuma's persistent assertion that contributors should finance his individual protection. The monetary values in dispute are considerable. The Gauteng High Court specified that the R28.9 million owed comprises 2 distinct amounts. The first, R18.2 million, was requested in October 2021, followed by an additional R10.7 million. Interest accrues on both sums from the original dates of request. The practical consequence is evident. The longer Zuma postpones compensation, the more the obligation expands. Every passing day contributes financial burden to the responsibility. Yet, this is not merely about figures. It is about responsibility, a principle Zuma has opposed for years, utilizing every judicial strategy conceivable to defer consequences for his suspected wrongdoing. The reaction from the Democratic Alliance has been immediate and forceful. DA Representative Willie Ocamp emphasized that the verdict is not a governmental triumph but a victory for South African contributors who have carried the monetary burden of Zuma's tribunal confrontations for years. Ocamp highlighted that Zuma had gained from nearly $29 million in civilian resources over the previous 7 years while everyday South Africans struggled to survive. The DA has further demanded that Zuma resolve the obligation within 60 days, cautioning that should he neglect to conform, the government must retrieve the resources by seizing his assets, including his presidential retirement benefits. The concept of confiscating Zuma's retirement benefits is significant. The benefits are financed by contributors to support previous leaders in retirement. Yet, they could now function to compensate them for currency expended on protecting a previous president accused of grave offenses. Symbolically, this would signify a reclamation of civilian assets and an uncommon instance of accountability in the battle against graft. The Jacob Zuma Foundation, represented through Representative Mzwaneli Mani, responded cautiously. The foundation suggested that it would need to consult Zuma's legal unit before providing any formal commentary. Behind this measured declaration, however, lies the unvarnished truth: Zuma's judicial alternatives are diminishing. He no longer commands a devoted cabinet to shield him, nor does he possess colleagues in critical government organizations protecting him from responsibility. This is no longer a situation of governmental power or civilian sentiment. It is the statute demanding compensation, and it is resolute. To comprehend the severity of the circumstances, one must trace Zuma's judicial difficulties back to the late 1990s. He was accused of receiving bribes from French weapons producer Thales during the disputed weapons acquisition transaction, with claims that he supplied governmental protection in exchange. These accusations shadowed him throughout his administration and beyond. Over generations, Zuma depended on every procedural instrument accessible to circumvent confronting proceedings. From the notorious spy recording narrative to the Nkandla controversy and even to his unwillingness to appear before the Zondo Commission, Zuma repeatedly positioned himself as a casualty of governmental schemes, asserting harassment by adversaries attempting to suppress him. Yet this latest verdict is distinctive. It is about compensation of currency, not governmental manipulation. There is no facade of scheme here. The statute has requested resources improperly utilized and Zuma cannot assert victimhood in this situation. Judge Miller's determination was intentionally transparent and objective. He stressed that the government's requests were valid and that Zuma's absence of participation was equally apparent. In straightforward terms, the directive is elementary: reimburse the currency with interest. Furthermore, the judge mandated advancement documentation to the tribunal, guaranteeing that the civilian population will remain updated about whether Zuma satisfies his responsibilities. The contradiction is challenging to disregard. Jacob Zuma, formerly the individual who asserted the ANC would administer South Africa until Jesus returned, is now subject to the power of the legal system he attempted to weaken. The identical leader who could unilaterally reorganize administrations or remove finance administrators now cannot escape an obligation established by the tribunals. While he still maintains the devotion of certain advocates, largely from his governmental derivative, the Umkhonto we Sizwe Party, this verdict destroys the understanding of his invulnerability. The wider importance of this verdict extends far beyond Zuma himself. For generations, South Africans have endured the ramifications of graft, mishandling, and governmental favoritism. Every postponed proceeding, every instance of civilian currency exploited, and every occurrence of responsibility evaded has had genuine ramifications for residents: deteriorating provisions, inconsistent power, and escalating financial difficulty. The R28.9 million that Zuma is indebted is more than a monetary value. It is an emblem of all these breakdowns. It signifies the individual advantage extracted at the civilian population's cost, the exploitation of authority, and the deterioration of confidence in government organizations. What is exceptional about this period is that accountability, after so many years of postponements and impediment, has functioned conclusively. South Africa's legal system has illustrated that even the most influential governmental personalities are not exempt from the statute. The verdict also transmits a forceful communication to other leaders and administrators: exploitation of civilian assets carries ramifications. Responsibility, formerly a remote commitment, is becoming concrete. Should Zuma reimburse the resources, it will signify an uncommon occurrence in which the civilian population can observe a direct remedial measure against graft, a modest but significant stride toward restoring confidence in the organizations designed to shield residents and maintain equity. Jacob Zuma's heritage is an intricate composition. Formerly a liberation symbol and an emblem of opposition against apartheid, his subsequent years in authority have been dominated by claims of graft, manipulation, and personal interest. His administration exemplifies the perils of unrestricted governmental power, while this latest verdict illustrates the strength of statute and organizational responsibility to counterbalance such power. While Zuma's governmental account has often concentrated around his depiction as a defender of the marginalized, the R28.9 million he is indebted emphasizes a more sobering truth: civilian administration is a responsibility, not an individual advantage. South Africa's trajectory toward rehabilitation from generations of graft and government seizure is extensive and challenging. But this determination signifies a landmark. It reinforces the concept that nobody, no matter their previous administration, appeal, or governmental power, is beyond the statute. It also emphasizes the significance of engaged citizenship and resistance supervision. The DA's determination, combined with a legal system prepared to implement the statute, has made this responsibility feasible. Whether Zuma ultimately reimburses the obligation or further postponements extend the situation, the tribunal has established a standard that exploitation of civilian resources will not proceed unchallenged. In summary, the narrative of Jacob Zuma and the R28.9 million indebted to the government is more than a chronicle of monetary settlement. It is an account about responsibility, accountability, and the persistent conflict between authority and concept in South African governance. For years, Zuma advocates and opponents alike have observed as judicial maneuvers and governmental approach obscured the reality. Now, the reality has been exposed. Civilian currency expended for individual advantage must be reimbursed. The determination is a validation to the strength of the judicial apparatus and a reminder that the concepts of equity and accountability can succeed even against formidable governmental personalities. Whether Zuma will conform or persist to contest the verdict, South Africans have observed an uncommon period where the statute has functioned conclusively. The R28.9 million is more than an obligation. It is an emblem of responsibility, a settlement with generations of suspected graft, and a concrete stride toward reclaiming civilian assets. It is a period that may not illuminate the history, but it indicates a preparedness to address it. In a territory still confronting the ramifications of government seizure and graft, that reality matters profoundly. South Africa cannot reconstruct or restore until every person, irrespective of their position, responds for the exploitation of the territory's prosperity. If Zuma compensates what he is indebted, it may be a modest gesture, but it would signify a significant advancement toward accountability finally administered.